Hi sweet friends, and welcome back to Mary's Nest. Today we're making homemade biscuits using whole wheat pastry flour. They're light and fluffy, and since they're made with whole grain flour, they're good for you too. Watching Sarah Moulton years ago on Food Network, I heard her mention that James Beard loved homemade biscuits. And the way that he liked them prepared was with using cream instead of butter, which fascinated me tremendously, and I started making them that way. But his original recipe called for using white flour. But today, I want to make them using whole wheat pastry flour. Now, I've tried making them with whole wheat flour. They're a little dense, and I've also tried making them with spelt flour. They're a little better, and then I've tried making them with sprouted spelt flour, and that even makes them a little lighter too. But I understand that making them with whole wheat pastry flour, which is made from a soft wheat instead of a hard wheat, will actually make a lighter, tender biscuit, or any baked good for that matter. So I'm very intrigued to see how this is going to come out. Well, let's get started and we'll go over the ingredients. As I said, we've got the whole wheat pastry flour, and my grocery store did not carry this, and I actually had to find it at Whole Foods. So I'm not sure how often I would make them, but I think for a treat that's nice. And then it calls for cream, and I've got that here, and a little sugar, a little baking powder, and a little bit of salt, and that's it. So I'll get ready and we'll start mixing. Well, I've got 1 cup of flour in there, and the way I like to measure my flour out is the lift and scoop method, rather than just putting my thing in and scooping it and then leveling it off. I like to scoop it out first with a spoon and then put it into the measuring cup. I feel that this is keeps it from being compressed and possibly getting too much flour. Let's see if that levels off. Yeah, that levels off nicely. Okay, so now that's the 2 cups of flour. Alrighty, now I'm going to put that flour aside, and the next ingredient is that the recipe calls for a tablespoon of, I think that'll be fine, a tablespoon of baking powder. And this is an aluminum-free baking powder. Okay, and then the next thing, the recipe calls for 2 teaspoons of sugar. And I am going to follow this. A lot of times when recipes call for sugar, I'll use the sucanat or rapadura, the dried cane juice. But since we're making biscuits, I'm actually getting a little low on this. I'm going to follow this and use the white sugar. I think that it's going to come out better. Alrighty, so I get those 2 teaspoons of sugar. And then the next thing that it calls for is a teaspoon of salt. Now, the one thing I want to mention about the cream is the original recipe calls for like 1.5 cups of cream, and it says you may need more than that. And I'm thinking that since this is a whole wheat, even though it's pastry flour, we may even wind up needing more than the 1.5 cups, but we'll play that by ear and we'll see how it goes. Okay, and now a teaspoon of salt. Okay, I think that's perfect. Put that salt to the side. I'm just going to get my whisk just to whisk all this together. The pastry flour looks nice. It's definitely, it actually looks and definitely feels lighter in texture and color than the whole wheat flour that I'm used to. Now, the interesting thing, because I read up on this is made from a soft white wheat versus whole wheat flour, your traditional whole wheat flour, which is made from a hard red wheat. And then there's even the other flour, which I definitely want to try another time and make biscuits with, that is the white whole wheat flour. Now it's funny having the white in front. It is a whole grain, it's 100% whole grain, but it's called white whole wheat flour, and it's also a hard wheat. but it's, and I don't know, maybe you all will know more detail than me, and we can just kind of all discuss it down in the comments below. I think it's like, I don't know if a hybrid is the right word, or some variation on hard red wheat. And the white hard wheat, or the white whole wheat, makes a lighter, tender baked good than the hard red wheat, but for basically the same nutritional value. I think the hard red wheat might be slightly more nutritious, but it's still very close. So I'd be interested in trying that and see if it comes out equally as light as the whole wheat pastry flour. I don't know, we'll see, because this is a soft wheat, but this is harder to find, and the whole wheat flour I can find easily. Even the white whole wheat flour I can find easily at my grocery store. Alrighty, well, let me measure out the cream, and we'll pour that in there, and then we'll get to kneading it. Alrighty, well, like I said, the recipe calls for up to 1.5 cups of cream. So I'm going to start with the 1 cup, and I'm going to pour that in. It's a little chunky there. That's okay. It's this is that Kelowna Supernatural, and sometimes the cream almost is borderline butter, but that'll be good for the biscuits. And then I'm going to kind of eyeball this, because we may wind up adding more anyways, more or less, and that's I'm going to put in for the 1/2 cup. Alrighty, then what I'm going to do is I'll get ready. I'm going to get a wooden spoon. I'm going to mix this up, and I'll bring you in closer so you can see exactly what I'm doing. Let me get the wooden spoon, and we'll just start mixing this. Oh, it mixes up beautifully. If it lets you see that. Alrighty, well, I'll keep mixing, and I'll bring in so that you can see exactly what I'm doing. Well, I switched to my spatula only because I always find it easier to work with this rather than the wooden spoon. And it's actually one of those neat spatulas that's kind of like a spoon. I think we used to call them spoonulas or spatulas or something. I forget exactly. But, well, this is coming together nicely. Now, it says, if the original recipe says, and assuming you were making this with white flour, it says, if the dough is dry, add some extra cream. And this does seem dry, and I was expecting, and we don't want to overwork it because it is a biscuit recipe. If you overwork it, the biscuits will be tough. And this definitely looks quite dry, and so I think that I'm going to add another, I'm thinking maybe a 1/4 cup of cream, or maybe even a 1/2 cup. This is, well, I think it'll come together, maybe just a 1/4 cup, and we'll see how that mixes up. I'm just going to pour that on like that, and then we'll just incorporate that all. Oh yeah, I think that's going to be just enough. I think that's going to be perfect. Alrighty, well, I'm going to just continue working this, and just gently working it, and then I'm going to flour my board and bring you back, and I'll show you how we'll cut the biscuits and put them on a baking sheet. Perfect. Well, I don't exactly have it into a square, but that's okay, because what I like to do when I make biscuits to sort of always ensure that they'll be fluffy is to fold them into 3s. I'm sticking a little under here. There we go. Fold them into 3s like that, and then flatten it out again. So that's what I'm going to do, and I'll keep doing that, and I'll get it back into that nice shape that I had before, and then we'll go ahead and cut out the biscuits. Well, I've got it into a rectangle, and I'm going to leave well enough alone because I don't want to overwork the dough. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take my knife, and as they said I've dusted it with a little bit of flour. I'm just going to go right down the middle, and then I'm just going to do something like this, because I want the biscuits to be a decent size so that you can make almost like a little sandwich with them. Now, what's interesting is this recipe says that, let's see what we're going to do here, that you dip them in butter and then bake them, but you don't have to do that. But so what I'm going to do for this time is just put them right in the oven and see how they do with the whole wheat pastry flour. Well, I've got them all cut up and onto my baking sheet. I've just got them on some parchment paper, and then I'm just dusting them, not dusting them, painting them here more or less with a little bit of melted butter, and I'm just going to top each one with a little bit of salt, and then I'm going to put it in the oven. I've preheated my oven to 425 degrees Fahrenheit, and I think these are going to bake pretty quickly. We'll see. It'll be interesting to see how they come out. I have to say, they have a little different appearance than what I'm used to, and secondly, whenever I've made cream biscuits in the past, I think I might have said this in the beginning, I always made them as drop biscuits, and they're delicious. You can add a little cheddar cheese, a little chives, things like that, and they can be very much like those delightful biscuits that you get at Red Lobster. I don't know if you've been over to that restaurant. They have wonderful biscuits, and I like to make them like that. And I don't know what their recipe is, but if you make cream biscuits and you just make them drop biscuits, they come lovely. So I don't know, we'll see about this with the whole wheat pastry flour and the cutting and whatnot. Hopefully I didn't overwork it. And I'm going to pop them in the oven and we'll see how they come out. Well, I just took these out of the oven. They were at 425 Fahrenheit for about 12 minutes, and there's not much rise out of them, which I was kind of expecting given that it is whole wheat. Now, the interesting thing is, though, they do feel quite light, so I'm interested in giving them a taste. I'm just going to give them I just took these out of the oven, so it's still pretty hot. I'm just going to give them a second to cool. Well, I've just given them a second to cool, and I'm going to give this a taste test, and we'll see how it is. It's interesting. Almost more like a little cake than a biscuit. But it's actually very tasty. Very tender. It's quite nice. But I think what I would do next time, I definitely think I would do these as drop biscuits rather than rolled and cut biscuits. I think that they'll be a little more domed-like, and you can add a little more flavor. Although it is very flavorful, you can add a little more maybe a little cheese, a little scallions, or chopped green onions, like I was mentioning, making them a little more similar to those ones from the Red Lobster Fish House. But they're not bad for a whole wheat. But as you can see, it's a little. I'll bring you in closer so you can see the texture. It's a little more cakey than biscuity, but it's worth a try. But I think next time when I do these, I'm going to do them as drop biscuits, and I'll bring you along and we'll see how that goes. So here's the texture, just so that you can see them up close. As you see, it's almost like a little cake-like, more so than biscuit-like. They're unusual. When I've made biscuits, as I said, using whole grains, making a drop biscuit, which I think is a little more successful endeavor, they don't have such a cake-like texture. They have more of a biscuity texture. But it's interesting nonetheless, and they are flavorful. And if you want to try and do something like this, where you are using whole grains, it's definitely worth a try. And then, but next time we'll try drop biscuits. If you enjoyed experimenting with me today, baking with whole wheat pastry flour, I hope you'll give me a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. And if you do, be sure to click on the notification bell. That'll let you know each time I upload a new video. And I'll also put in the description below a link to the recipe for this. Well, that's all for today, but I want to thank you so much for joining me, and I look forward to having you join me again right here in my Texas Hill Country kitchen. Love and God bless. Oh, before you go, if you enjoy experimenting with whole grain flours and baking with them, be sure to check out these two videos. I think you'll enjoy them. Well, that's all for today, but I look forward to seeing you next time. Oh, and don't forget, subscribe and click the notification bell below. Bye for now.